Gabriella Kornsgold. And thank you so much, Rabbi, for being with us and for taking the time out of your busy schedule and all the service that you do. She is with the Mount Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. And if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, especially on such an important day. My name is Rabbi Gabriella Kornsgold, and as mentioned, I am one of the rabbis at Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. And I've been at Sinai Temple for a few years now. We are a special community in the heart of Westwood in Los Angeles, and we are blessed to have a large clergy team. Not all synagogues have women on their clergy team, but I feel very lucky to be in a space where we are 4 rabbis, 2 male rabbis, 2 female rabbis, 2 of our senior rabbis. One is a male rabbi, one is a female rabbi. So that is part of our community in a beautiful and special way. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Los Angeles, spent a lot of time in New York, and came back to Los Angeles. And on this day, I'll say in particular that my family was not one to have experienced the Holocaust. My family came to the United States at the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s, due to pogroms in Eastern Europe. So while I connect to the history of the Holocaust being a Jew, it is not my own family story, but it is my husband's family story. My husband's family is from, part of his family is from Poland, and his grandparents were born in Poland and escaped Poland. They ended up in Siberia, and then in DP camps at the end of the war, and ended up in Philadelphia. And that is many survivors' stories, ending up in lots of different places until arriving in America. And thank God they were able to do so, because now it's a beautiful thing to see my husband's grandmother, who's a survivor, holding our children, her great grandchildren. That there's a joy to that, even in the sadness of knowing that so much of not just our families, but the Jewish people will not be able to have those joyful moments, which is why this day is so important. And we hold on to marking Holocaust Remembrance Day and thinking about the future. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being with us. You know, I had never met a female rabbi before meeting you, and
yes,
and it was a surprise to me. But it's such a joy to know you. I just have to tell the audience that when I met Gabriella, she just was so warm, and I just hugged her, and she just hugged me, and I immediately felt, you know, a kinship with her, and I said, we've got to do something in the future.
Absolutely. And, you know, we were chatting, that's how relationships happen. And you just meet someone and you feel something and you say, we're meant to know each other. And here we are.
Yeah, I really felt that. I just felt like God just kind of plopped you right there, you know, so that I could just happen to be at that place at that time and get to know you. And
exactly. You never know where those moments are going to happen.
Right. That's exactly right. And I appreciate your faith, and I appreciate, you know, the dedication that you have. You know, your whole life is in service to the Jewish people and to others. You know, not, I know you do a lot of service in the community and things like that as well. And your husband is a rabbi too.
Yes, we are a family of many rabbis, which is mostly a blessing, right?
Then you get to see someone says, wait, I want to say the prayer. No, wait, I want to say the prayer.
Exactly. But, you know, it really is a beautiful thing. We get to all be partners in the sacred work that we do. And for our family to feel that so deeply is very sacred. And, you know, informs every day of our lives what it means to be Jewish. And especially thinking about Holocaust Remembrance Day, that's what it's about in many ways, of saying there are things that we hold on to so tightly, so dearly, whether it be family or faith or trust or resilience. There's so many ways to go about being in the world. And I would say one of those ways is also with openness and having an open heart. And you're saying, it was serendipitous that we met, but I think that happens when you have an open heart, when you walk into a room and you feel that you never know what small miracle is going to happen today. I know you're going to hear some stories today that I assume are going to include some small and maybe not so small miracles of people
Absolutely.
going through the war. So that's what every day is about in many ways.
Yes, yes, there are some amazing miracles, and I've talked to some of the guests, to hear their story beforehand, and I've read so many different Holocaust survivors' stories and their
Mhm.
books that they have written, and ever since I've been a girl, I first read Anne Frank's book, and I read Corrie ten Boom, that she wasn't Jewish, but she was an ally to the Jews and
Right.
hid the Jews, and and so many other books that I have read. And every time my children had to do a report in school and they had to pick the topic, I always had them pick the Holocaust so that they
Mm,
would be aware and
right.
they would understand that. And now my oldest daughter is a lawyer and she works to fight anti-Semitism. And so it just makes my heart just feel so happy to know that that there are people that are rallying together to work to increase that awareness. And so I'm so
Yeah.
happy to have this event today, and I appreciate so much you being here. And I'm grateful to have your blessing on this special day. And I'd love to have you start with a scripture.
Of course. And we'll start with the scripture, and we're thinking about, you know, this moment in Deuteronomy in chapter 30. And I'm going to read a text in Hebrew and then I'll read it in English. And this text, Deuteronomy 30, verse 19, it says, Hayidut bachem hayom et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, hachayim ve'hamavet natati lefanecha, habracha ve'kalkala, uvacharta b'chayim, leman tichya ata v'zarecha. Which is that God says, I'm calling on heaven and earth as a witness. I'm calling heaven and earth as a witness. I've put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Ubacharta b'chayim, choose life. And this is a text that comes in a moment of right before it talking about peril, talking about being perished. And God responds by saying, yes, there are moments in life where there's going to be blessing and curse. Choose life. And
Oh,
unfortunately, no matter how much individuals might want to choose life, of course, we see from the Holocaust, there are those who did not have that choice. But when we're given that choice, choose life.
right.
So, with that, I want to light some candles. We're going to light 6 candles. And I have these special candles in front of me for Holocaust remembrance. And they have photos of lots of different survivors and not survivors, those who have perished and those who have survived. And of course, the yellow star. And we light 6 candles. I'm going to light 6 candles, and we light them in memory of the 6 million Jews who perished. And of course, we know that there were others who were also killed in the Holocaust. So we're lighting for the 6 million Jews. We're also lighting, of course, to remember those who were not Jewish, the
Mhm.
millions of people who were killed, murdered by the Nazis during World War II in the Holocaust. So I'm lighting 6 candles. And as we light candles, candles are sacred in Judaism. We begin sacred moments, holidays, Shabbat, with candles, moments of joy. But we also light candles in memory that whenever we have a day where we are remembering someone. We call it a yahrzeit, where it is the day where we remember their death. So we light 6 candles here that I have in front of me to mark the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That is so sacred. And I think about, when people live and they get to be older, they hope that they're remembered. They hope that something that they learned in this life is of value to their posterity or to anyone. And I often, each time I have a Holocaust remembrance, I think about those 6 million who perished and their joy of being remembered, and it really touches my heart. I feel them here. I feel them so grateful that someone does remember them, and that their lives were not in vain, that we are striving to choose life each day. We're striving to overcome our own challenges and to turn to God and to be resilient with Him by our side. And so thank you so much for bringing that up and for lighting these beautiful candles and for your very, very wonderful, warm energy. And thank you for your friendship and for opening our day today.
Thank you. I want to close with a prayer called El Malei Rachamim, which is the prayer of memory. It's a memorial prayer that we say at a funeral, we say in a moment of marking the death of someone, or on a day like today. So I'll sing it first in Hebrew and then I'll say it in English. El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Menachona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, B'Ma'alot Kedoshim Utarim B'Zohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmot Achinu Bnei Yisrael HaKadoshim V'Tarim Shenaflu B'Yedei Harotzchim V'Nishpach Damam. Bavur Shechol HaKal HaKadosh Hazeh Mitpalelim Ba'ad Azkarat Nishpotam B'Gan Eden Mikadem Tiyeh Menuchatam Lachen Ba'al HaRachamim Yasirem B'Seter Knafecha Le'olamim Utzror B'Tzror HaChaim Et Nishmotam Adonai Hu Nachalatam V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavav Al Mishkavotam B'Shalom V'Nomar Amen. And we say, El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the souls of Achenu Bnei Israel, of our brothers and sisters of the Jewish people, the holy and the pure, who were killed by the hands of those who spilled their blood mercilessly, who have gone to their eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved ones find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life, and may they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much. And yes, in the goal of greater peace, I thank you again for being with us today and for your beautiful presence, and give my best regards to your husband in honor of his family as well. Thank you so much.
I will. Thank you. And thank you for the honor of being here and for what you're doing. We need it. We have to remember.
Yes, we do. We do. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You as well.
I come from a family of 8 children, 6 girls and 2 boys. We had a wonderful life under the Czech government. I'm Jewish, by the way, and the Jewish people had the same rights like everybody else. We lived in a 3-room house. We had no electricity and we have no bathrooms in the house. We had no stores where you could go buy stuff. The only thing we did have is a bakery. That's about it. So in 1939, the end of 38, a half a dozen Hungarian soldiers came in on bicycles and they settled over there. Life continues, not too bad. But little by little, everything was changing. And also, the same time, all the Jewish businesses were taken away. My father was a tailor and he had a shop in the middle of town. And so all the Jewish people that had stores or shops, they were all taken away. And things were not so good after that was happening. And of course, all the men were taken away for 6 days a week, every day, to do slave labor. Before, we were first-class citizens because we were practically running the town. But now we are third-class citizens. We don't have the rights for anything. We had no higher education than middle school. And all of a sudden, while this is happening, all our non-Jewish friends are beginning to be kind of nasty, calling us dirty Jew, and all kinds of things that were not ever before. So what can you do? You have no choice. We have to just go along because we have no rights anymore. This is going on for quite a while. In 1944, we had the farmers' market, and the man is making announcements. Radio was very against the law during the war, and we never had newspapers. This man is announcing all the Jewish people are going to be shipped away, sent away. You have one today or tomorrow. There were certain things that they asked us to do, the leaders who are doing all this horrible stuff to us, okay? They said, if anybody has any money or valuables, you can bring it over here and we're going to keep it for you, and when you come back, you will get it back. You know what BS means. I was 14 years old, so my father, he put a few pieces of jewelry together in a little shoe polish box. This is from my father's pocket watch. So this necklace goes on my neck, and the last thing when I go to bed, when I take it off, I feel that my father is with me, and I believe that's how I'm still here. Finally, they take all the information, and then they put us on oxen-driven wagons. You know what oxen are, right? I could walk faster than they do. They took many, many hours, probably 8 to 10 hours before we got there. And when we got there, they put up some make-believe tents because there were no buildings. And this is April 1944. The temperature is about between 25 and 30 degrees. So we were over there maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I have no idea how long. And finally, they put us on a train. They squeezed in 70, 80 people in every train. And then they closed the doors, locked the doors, and off we went. 2.5 days. We had no food in the train, we had no water in the train, no place to relieve yourself, so you can imagine what the train must have been. Finally, after going and going, the train slows down, and Auschwitz, Poland. The door opens, and a man in a striped uniform comes on the train to help us with our luggage. He comes to me, he says to me, how old are you? I said, I am 14. He says, tell him you're 18. I had no idea what he was talking about. We come in front of 3 SS soldiers, and I believe one of them was Mengele. And he says to me, how old are you? I said, I'm 18. He let me go with my 2 older sisters, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. I would have gone with my mother and 3 sisters and brothers straight into the gas chamber. I never saw my mother and 3 sisters and brother again. And so they marched us into this building, and they told us to take all our clothes off and put it on that pile over there. And then they shaved our hair, not only our head, everywhere. And they gave us a dress from another pile. Because all the clothes that we brought with us, all those clothes were sent to Germany for their families. So we go outside after a while, after we got our clothes on, the dress on, we go outside and we're standing in line, always 5 in a row. And then there's a Polish guard standing next to my sister Judy with a gun and a dog. and there's a big fire behind the building. You can see smoke, and you can hear children crying, and you can hear adults calling names, and really weird, okay? So my sister said to this guard that was standing next to her, "What is that noise behind the building? What's the fire and the noise?" He says they were burning hair. So she said, burning hair would make this kind of noise, and he said they were burning cripples. So later on, the next day when we came into the barracks, maybe the next day or two, we found out what they did. They didn't even give the people enough gas to kill them all the way. They shoved them out the back door, and they burned them half alive. So we knew what happened to our families. There were 3 camps by 12-foot electric fences. So, and before we walked in through the gate, there was a big sign. It says, "Arbeit macht das Leben frei." Work makes for freedom. So we march into this camp, and there's 30 barracks over there. My 2 sisters and I ended up in barrack 26, and we walk into our barrack, and we had 3 rows of bunks. No blankets, no nothing. We kept each other's bodies warm. So we go to sleep, we get up the next morning. So I said to my sisters, "I want to go outside, I want to know what's going on." I go outside, and I'm walking, and I see these electric these fences, 12-foot fences on either side of us, and you see people holding on with their fingers, holding on. Dead people, half dead, they touch the electric fences to commit suicide. Because this started in 1942, and we are here in 1944, okay? You can't even explain how it looked. It was worse than hell. I'm walking, and all of a sudden somebody calls my name. "Rosie, Rosie." So I figured, my God, I knew I was popular. I didn't know I was so popular that I should be found in this God-forsaken place. It was my father. Before, he had always wore a suit, a tie, a hat, glasses, a beard, well-dressed, you know. And here he's in a striped uniform, shaven head, no glasses, everything. So when you're used to seeing somebody a certain way, you know, you have to look twice before you recognize him. He says, "Rosie, Rosie, don't you recognize me?" So we hugged and we kissed, and the first thing he said to me, "Where's your mother?" And at that time, I really didn't know, because this was the first morning there. So I told him, "I'm here with my 2 sisters, Helen and Judy." He says, "Whatever you do, stay together, because you have a much better chance of surviving. And also stay alive so you can tell the world what they're doing to us." And we kissed and we hugged, and we made up to meet up the next morning. And my father said, "Bring your sisters." And the next morning we went and we met my father and my brother, and we were together and we were talking for a little while. And he repeated the same thing: "Whatever you do, stay alive so you can tell the world what they're doing." So this is what I'm doing, okay? So we said goodbye, and within 2 months, over 500,000 Hungarian Jews were brought into Auschwitz, complete families. And if 20% of them survived, we are lucky. And I really mean that. After being there 10 days, we probably each lost at least 10 pounds because there's no food. They're always coming to our camp to take survivors to factories to work. That's why they brought us there. And sometimes they would make us get undressed to see if we have any flesh on our bodies, because you have no idea how some people were skin and bone, really skin and bone. So after, as I said, a week or so, they're going to get selected and putting me in the gas chamber line. And we know what to do. You know, when you're in a place like this, people give you advice what to do. So they would tell me, if they put you in the gas chamber line, make sure nobody sees you, get out of the line. And that's what I did. And then my sisters would do the same thing, because we promised my father we're going to stay together. So they had to get out of the line, and I had to get out of the line. So we did this maybe 3-4 times, and then we decided we are going to wait for the war to end. After being there about 5-6 weeks in this camp, we found out that we have cousins in barrack number 2 who's in charge of the barrack. And you know what that means? An extra slice of bread, an extra something, okay? So of course we moved to barrack number 2. It was an amazing thing for us to be with, first of all, not only the food, but being with relatives together. So finally, while we were with our cousins, we probably each put on a couple of pounds because we had extra food. And then they came to our barrack, I think must have been the 4th month that we were there, and they need 300 women to go to Freudenthal in Germany to a factory to work. So I said to my sisters, you go out and get selected, and I'll see how I can steal myself into this transport. I know they would never select me to go in it, okay? So my 2 sisters were selected, and then as I'm in the barrack, trying to see how I can, and we had the door in the back of the barrack, and somebody was guarding the door. So I was waiting to see who is going out through that back door. Maybe if I see somebody that maybe knows me a little bit, I can go out with her. So it took me a while, then I quickly chased to the back door, and she says, where are you going? She says, you're supposed to go through the front to get selected to factory to work. I said, my mother just walked out, I want to go with her. How this came to my brain to say such a thing, it was a big lie. And she let me out. My sisters held a place for me in line. This is how I got out of Auschwitz-Birkenau. In the meantime, we are here for 4 months, or maybe a little longer. We haven't had a cleaning in 4 months. Can you imagine not having a cleaning in 4 months? Our bodies were full of lice. We couldn't sleep at night. They were biting us so badly. So of course, they're not going to send us anywhere to a factory to work in this situation. So they're marching us to the bathroom. They're shaving our hair again, disinfecting our bodies, giving us decent clothes, underwear, socks, and shoes. It's like 1,000 times better than what we had. So finally, we are all dressed and we're all ready to be shipped away. So let me show you my tattoo. You see this? It's A25893. This was an Auschwitz tattoo. Once you get the tattoo, you feel a lot safer because you know that they're going to send you to a factory to work, okay? So finally, they put us on a train. We are 300 women, and we are all assigned to different jobs. We have mattresses, and we have blankets. I mean, it's like heaven compared to Auschwitz, okay? So I was assigned to work on gas masks, 12 hours every day. So after doing that for about 10 days, I said to the people who were serving us lunch every day, I said, you know, this is hard work. I should get an extra meal. Doesn't hurt to ask. Remember, if you need something, don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing is you get a no answer, okay? So she says, sure, you could have an extra meal. And what I used to do is take that meal into the living quarters, and I would share it with my sisters. Finally, we're working and everything is going great, okay? And they're always telling us if we don't do good work, they're going to send us back to the Auschwitz. And you know what Auschwitz means? A crematorium, okay? So this is going on for about 8 months. And they always used to come to our building to march us to the factory to work. But anyway, nobody's coming to pick us up. So we're waiting and waiting. And finally, I said to my sisters and all the other ladies, I probably was the youngest girl over there. And I had more guts than anybody else over there, too. I said, I'm going out. I want to see what's going on, okay? So they said, well, you can't go out. It's locked. I said, I'm going to try and get out. So I go out. The door is wide open. It wasn't even locked. I go out, and the electric gate is wide open. All the Germans ran away. And then I hear planes going over us, and we hear shooting guns. The Russian soldiers were coming through the cornfields, through the back of the building. We were wearing regular clothes. We were not wearing uniforms, so I figured if I go in front of the Russians in a regular dress, they would think I'm a German woman. They would probably kill me, okay? Because the Russians were very easy with their guns, okay? So I tore a piece of my dress off, and I found a stick, and I put that piece of material from the dress on the stick, and I went like this in front of the Russians in back of our building. I went there, and they liberated us. They hugged me and kissed me, and I told them we have 300 women here. The Russians were very good to us, let me tell you. So the Russian soldiers came, and one of them asked me, "Do you want to go to town?" I said, "Sure, I could use an extra dress, an extra pair of shoes, or whatever, you know." So we go into town, and I said, "Can I bring a friend with me?" Because I was afraid to go by myself with him. And I think that day, I was reborn. There's something happened in my body, like something went through my body. I couldn't believe that I was free. I can do what I want. Finally, the end of the war. It was an amazing feeling in my system. I don't know how it happened. So we had to stay about 2 weeks in this place, and finally we decided it's time to go to a train station and try to go home. It took 4 weeks to get home, and we were having a good time, actually, meeting all kinds of people all along, and all of a sudden the whole world is so kind to us. They're offering us to sleep at night, okay? Where was the world when we needed them? Nobody offered to help us. Unbelievable what happened to us. So the first thing we did was we found a stool, and we climbed up and got the little jewelry box, the shoe polish box where we have hiding the jewelry. And that's when we divided the jewelry between us. No parents came back from the war. No mother or father, not one. Of course, not too many people came back to my village. Only about 18 or 20 people came back. We had 600 people there. Somebody came home that was with my father in camp, and he told us what happened to my father. My father was in a factory working, and he got sick, and they put him in the gas chamber. They couldn't help him. So we knew my father is gone. A few days later, somebody else came back that was with my brother in a camp, okay? They were in Germany in a big factory working, 300 men, and 10 days before the war ended, they took the whole camp into the forest, made them dig a big hole, and they killed everybody. So I said, "So how did you survive?" He says, "I could not leave my bunk bed. He was so sick." He survived. All the others were killed. So anyway, so we knew what happened to my father and my brother, so there's no reason for us to stay here anymore. And then I finally got on the train to go to Prague. So my sister Helen said to me, "There is a gentleman by the name of Sir Leonard Montefiore who is looking for 1,000 Holocaust survivor children under age 16 to take to England for rehabilitation." And they used the bomber planes, all right? And they couldn't put more than 30, 35 kids on each bomber plane. So it took many, many trips. It started in August 1945 till February 1946. So I stayed in Prague till the last transport. We came to Bedford, okay, which is not far from London. And they were mostly all Polish and German boys, about 40 kids or so, okay? So they introduced us the next day, and there was a young man in the back, a gentleman. I said, "That's the man I'm going to marry." And of course, he already had a girlfriend. So it took some time, because we're all orphans, okay? So we're looking for families, really. They told us we could go live in London, we could go to Liverpool, we could go to Manchester. So we decided to go to London, and Max decided to do the same thing, and his girlfriend stayed behind, okay? And that's when we started dating, okay? So it took me a while, but I got him. That's what it is. Don't ever give up, guys, girls and boys. If you like somebody, remember it can happen. So finally, they put me in a private Jewish home where the government, the organization would pay for our upkeep. And they did this for many kids. And of course, we started dating, okay? And by 1948, we got engaged. By 1950, Max and I got married. It was the first wedding of survivors in London, okay? We invited all the survivors in London. Max was corresponding with some relatives in New York, and they offered to bring us to New York. So I said, "This is my dream, my dream to go to the United States." We came to New York in 1951. So here we are in New York. We speak perfect English, okay? So we found a room in somebody's house. So we lived in New York for 5 years, and I got a job in the garment industry, and I tell you, I made more money than lawyers. because it was piecework and I was so fast. My husband, he couldn't make much. He probably made a third of what I was making. So I was lucky in that way, okay? So after 5 years, we had a nice bundle of money already. So Max comes to San Diego just to see what's going on, okay? And he calls me. He came for Christmas time, 1955. He says, Rose, pack up, we're moving to San Diego. My husband got a job, double pay what he was getting in New York. So we moved to Del Cerro. We have 4 kids, 9 grandkids, 1 great-grandchild. And I want to say that we are so thankful to this country for letting us come and make a new life for ourselves. Because this is the best country in the world, guys. And I really mean that. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Oh my goodness. Ben, every time I see your mother, I am just so touched, and I'm trying to get composed to be able to talk. But we are so honored to get to hear this testimony from your mother, Rose Schendler, and we are so grateful that you were willing to come and share her story with us, and continue to share her legacy in what you are doing. So welcome, Ben. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Karen. I'm grateful to be here, and it's my pleasure and my honor, and a bit of a duty I have to keep the story alive.
Well, you're doing a wonderful job at that. Well, so before we talk about what Rose survived, can you tell us a little bit more about your mom and her cute personality? We could see how plucky she was, how determined, how courageous, and what a cute sense of humor she had. She just made us laugh when that's BS. You know what BS is. They're taking all our stuff and they promise to give it back. But tell us more about your mom.
Well, Mom was truly one of a kind. She was independent. She was determined. She was strong. She was plucky. In the British reports from all the people that rehabilitated her, the word that kept coming up on their end was cheeky. They called her cheeky. That's what they call you in the UK when you don't like to follow the rules. You're cheeky. She was just a woman with her own mind and her own, she had her own purpose. She knew what she wanted to do, and she was all about love. She just kept giving love, and and part of that resulted in humor, because she was so honest with people who usually don't hear that kind of true honesty, right? She just cut through it and told it like it was.
Yeah. Well, it's refreshing. It's so refreshing
It
to
is.
have someone, who is honest, and because you can trust that person because they will tell you, the honest truth.
Yeah, no filter. It was just straight up. We always heard what was on her mind. Good.
Well, I was going to say, thank heavens she didn't obey the rules, because to escape from the gas chamber line so many times and to be able to live, to tell about it, she had to be very creative at not following the rules that they had imposed on her. So could you tell us? Yeah, that's what exactly. Can you tell us what got her through the brutal, barbaric treatment?
Well, a couple things. First, it was her older sisters. So, she's a 14-year-old during her 4 or 5 months in Auschwitz in the general population that's not supposed to be under 18. a general, there's a women's, she's in a women's camp with 30,000 women in this, behind fences. And no one is supposed to be in there under 18. And she's, 14 and a half because she lies, and Mengele decides she's cute enough, they'll accept the lie. I think that's all it is. She was cute, blue eyes, she looked like a Czech girl, not like somebody that was threatening. So she had her sisters that helped keep her alive. Ultimately, they found their cousins in another barrack. They found a cousin was in charge of a barrack. Because prior to that, mom was really fading. Being as young as she was and as petite as she was looking like she wasn't going to make it after, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, maybe 5 weeks in the camp. And they started cutting her rations. The people who were in charge of her barrack, 28, realized, well, this kid ain't going to make it. So we're going to give her a half a slice of bread instead of one, and, watch her, slowly starve. And mom spoke up, and she suffered a beating such that she couldn't walk for 3 days. And this is already when she's in an emancipated state. So just a number of days after that, 4 or 5 days after that, milling around the open compound with all the people, they find out, oh my God, our cousins, Dory, I think was her name, she's in charge of the other barrack. And so they just slip their way in there, and all of a sudden she gets a little that, unfortunately it was probably an extra half a slice of bread that was taken from someone else, but at this point she started getting it. And that, they had about 6 or 8 weeks in that barrack with their cousins still in charge, and that allowed her to regain enough strength to carry on. Then the cousins get away. They finally they're like, we need to get out of here, so we're going to go get put into a work camp off site, a sub camp as they called them, of Auschwitz. And then mom and her sisters were all alone again, and that's when she lies again, goes through the back of the barrack, tells the guard that's my mom, sneaks her way into the transport, which was all her plan, around Auschwitz, into a camp that was the Freudenthal camp. Turned out to be a fairly pleasant work camp because I did the research. The owner wasn't a big anti-Semite. They had Nazis in the camp that guarded people that were, but my guess is they stayed drunk or on meth all the time. And, so none of the women were raped. I mean, if they were going to rape anyway, they would have taken the youngest, cutest one. That would have been mom. So they opted a bit of luck, a bit of stroke of grace there.
What a miracle. And can you tell us some of the other miracles that she experienced? Because it was obvious that she was being guided and protected.
Well, she just, I think it's more like that, the notion of pluck, she made her luck. That's how I see my mom. She created the conditions that allowed her to either, depending on how you want to look at it, got the grace from God, got the grace from the universe. She just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And,
Right.
Capo tell her, how old are you, sweetheart? Tell him you're 18. Of course, that's the exact same words that Elie Wiesel quotes in his book. How old are you, sweetheart? I'm 14, because they're the same age. Tell them you're 18. They may have even been on the same transport. Who knows? It was probably the same capo, because not every capo is going to do that. Because if any German overhears you saying that, you're shot in the head right there. There's no second choice, second chance. So there was a number of moments where I think, Grace smiled upon her and enabled her to just carry on to the next day. And I think that's the other thing to keep in mind, that all these people in the camps, especially the younger ones, these kids, they had to be in a really intense day-to-day circumstance. You cannot think of the future. You cannot even think about your past. You just have to try to survive on a day-to-day basis and, come up with the best method that you can for that. That's what mom did. And yeah, I think she was, the different survivors call them miracles. Some people call it luck. It's a combination of all those things.
Right. And I remember in her story, she said that she kept thinking about the message that her father gave her, that those words just rang in her mind. Make sure that you live to tell the world about what they have done to us. And then, to then have that that motivation. I mean, first of all, her motivation was to take care of her sisters and stay together, because he also said, "Stay together because that's how you'll survive." And so after the war, when she was liberated, how did she heal from this trauma?
Mm. Well, that's a good question. So, luckily, mom at the end in Freudenthal for the last 6 or 7 months was given an extra meal every day because, of course, she was cheeky enough to ask for one. And because they weren't a big anti-Semite running the place, he didn't come down hard on his employees because they were employees of his. And somehow the Nazis looked the other way too, because they had 11 SS officers there. But, again, I think they were just probably, it was the end of the war at that point. Germany already knew they were losing those last 8 months. They knew the war was gone. They were just trying to kill all the Jews to get to, carry out their plan. But these guys evidently didn't care too much about that. So they were, she just did whatever she had to do to get through it. And afterwards, rehabilitation in the United Kingdom, which led previous um, person and who was on the Kinder transports before the war. So he was a German who I forget his name right now, but he went to the UK as a 14 or 15-year-old in the Kinder transports, left his family behind, of course, like all of them had to do, and probably never saw his family again. He ultimately became a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm not sure which his title was, but he was trained to help with the human mind. And he was the one that was tapped by Montefiore, Leonard Montefiore, to be the leader of the rehabilitation for these kids. And they decided, and there's a great movie called The Windermere Children that is on BBC. It's a BBC One documentary about this experience in Windermere, the first 300 of the kids, which my father is part of. Mom was the last group to come to the United Kingdom. But the philosophy was that you're going to bring these kids in here, we're going to take good care of them, we're going to make them feel comforted and loved, and then we're just going to give them a really long leash. They just didn't try to tell them what to do. They figured these kids would figure it out. He really, if you watch the movie, he trusted that these kids were not going to turn into some kind of Lord of the Flies thing and, start eating each other, that they were all going to want to find love. And they did. That's how it worked out. So, yeah, I mean, one of their best friends becomes the chief rabbi of London. He was their best man at their wedding. At the time, he was selling pots and pans. His name is Hugo Gryn, Gryn. Has a couple of great books out. He's since passed. And he was mom's best friend. And then also Ben Helfgott, another one of their good friends from Windermere. He ultimately becomes a Olympic weightlifter and wins a bronze medal for his adopted country. And this is was a child survivor of the camps. So
Wow.
their kids went on to do really good things. They all knew that they had to replace what was lost, which was the family and the love that they lost.
Yes. Oh, and I remember, just the family, was just so important to your mother, and it was interesting to me how she didn't speak about the Holocaust, and of course, you know, being, wanting to say things that were age appropriate, to you children, but to others, she didn't speak about it very much. And then she had a moment when she decided, it's time. It's time to tell my story. What do you think changed in her that made her decide to tell her story?
Okay, so she's got four of us children at home, and we're all growing up, and we're all getting world history in seventh or eighth grade. And we're getting in our reading classes in seventh or eighth grade, Elie Wiesel's Night or Anne Frank's Diary. They push that now. Kids get that a little later now, but back then we got it a little earlier. And and after reading those books, it was time to start drilling down on those tattoos. What are those tattoos? Tell us what's going on here. So mom and dad, they didn't talk about each other's experience, even with each other. They just, when they met, they put that behind them, and they didn't. Max didn't share his 1,000 nights of story with Rose. Rose didn't share her, 11 months in the camps with Max. They just didn't share any of that. Actually, I think Mom was in there more like 13 months. But ultimately, my brother Steve, I think in 7th or 8th grade, is in the Anne Frank diary play as Peter. And he tells his teacher, my mom was in Auschwitz. She says, well, your mom, could she come talk to my class? Now, prior to that, this is how our book, Two Who Survived, actually ends. Just grab a book. That's how, our book, Two Who Survived, ends. And that is where they're sitting at the kitchen table and Dad's asking Mom, so how did it go today? You went down there to talk to all these kids. What did you think? And she tells him, unexpectedly, I feel like I was able to give and receive love.
Oh,
They did it didn't hurt them. She was afraid that telling the story would hurt people. So they didn't want to share and spread the hurt, the pain. Who wants to relive and so they come back. She comes home after that night and they're sitting around the table. This is, like I said, this is how the book ends in 1972. And she says, well, I think I found my mission. I think this is okay. So she starts in 72. It's maybe, one time in 72, maybe once or twice in 73. And then it just slowly builds up momentum. More teachers share with their friends, their other teacher friends, that, hey, there's a survivor in town, Rose Schindler. And there were others who at that point were willing to go out and tell the story. And so that became her mission. And I specifically remembered writing an essay, whatever, a term paper, some kind of paper in 7th or 8th or 9th grade on World War II. And this is one of those memories I probably will never lose. I remember having to chase my dad around the house to get answers because he kept trying to evade. And after about 20 or 30 minutes and him telling me what he could, he finally went in the bedroom and said, Ben, I just can't tell it anymore. So it was such a difficult experience to live through. It was that also held true to relive it. It was just so relive. So, I mean, Mom, in all of her talks, she cries every time she talks. There are tears. It's never easy. Um, she's always drained as a result of it. She won't do it multiple times in the same day. She, doesn't even want to do it, more than 3 or 4, back when she was alive, 3 or 4 times in a week. Although sometimes we broke those rules because we had a high demand. But anyway, that was when it started. It was so at this point, she's let's see, she's 41 or 42, so from 1945 to 1972, for those 27 years or whatever, they just don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. And actually, Mom tells a story. I'm not sure if it's in the video, but she's in a it's in the book. She's in a grocery store of some type in the UK. She's 18 or something at this point, and cute, blue-eyed, blonde, cheeky girl, and always dressed well because she made her own clothes. And there's a kid with his mom behind them in line, and the kid sees Mom's tattoo and asks his mom, what's that thing on that lady's arm? And Mom looks at the lady and they engage eyes. And Mom can see the fear in the woman's eyes because she knows that this woman knows that Rose is one of the child survivors that came. Because this part of the UK, that's where they live. There's more than one of them around there. There's got 732 of them around, so they're known. And Mom looks at the woman and looks down at the kid and says, "Oh, sweetheart, that's just my phone number. I don't." So, where she has the chance to share this terrible thing to try to, build her ego up, instead she deflates. So it's nothing, sweetheart. It's not for you to be concerned about. That was
It's interesting what you said about your dad, because so many people, that's one of the reasons why they don't tell the story, is because it is re-traumatizing to relive it and to have those feelings come back as they are, sharing the story. And so it took a lot of courage for your mom to share that story. And then her dedication to continue to live out that mission that she felt, from your grandpa's words, to tell the world what happened to us. And then for you to be a witness and to be her support and to be her roadie and to go with her and to see her continue on until her last days. It's in ill health. It just is absolutely tremendous to me to see how dedicated she was to telling her story. So thank you for all the support that you gave her so that we could also have the privilege of hearing her story. One last thing that I would like to have you share, and that is on the cover of the book, and you want to hold that book up again. If you could tell us about why you chose that picture on the cover.
So it's a great picture, huh? So this,
It is such a great picture.
yeah. So, once we had a manuscript and I knew we were going to generate a book, and, being in the printing industry, it was not a foreign subject to me. I've printed books before. I started looking through pictures. I have, since I'm in printing, I have lots of graphic artists friends and photographer friends. It's my business. So we started looking at pictures, and my wife, Amy, bless her soul, for their 50th wedding anniversary, had found this photo in their album. And we decided for their anniversary, we were going to take the photo. This is back in 2000, before Photoshop. And so we took the photo and we took it to a professional photo retoucher, because it was a black and white picture and there's other people in the picture and there's other stuff in the background, they weren't alone. And so we had it all colorized and painted. I mean, that her dress is painted in the photo here. It was all black and white. It was kind of a gray day. And then we did a little focus group. My graphic artist, her name is Mary Adsit, and her daughter, Alexandra. Alexandra, she's at a really high-end university right now. She's a super smart kid. We brought them over and we did like a focus group. So Alexandra's a 14-year-old that read like 2 books a week. She was one of those kind of kids. So we sat down at my table with mom, myself, my wife, and I, and Mary and her daughter, and we pulled out a bunch of pictures and we started brainstorming titles and pictures. And this was what was chosen. And mom was very much against it. I had to go against my mother's wishes, which is so hard when you're trying. But she didn't recognize what would be better for the cover of the book. She wanted this on the cover, the tattoos. And I said, Mom, I'm going to give you the back cover. I'll give you exactly what you want on the back. And you can show people first if that's what you want to do. And she did for like the first 6 months. Here's my book. She starts with the back. That's my tattoo. But then I think she ultimately realized that people loved the picture of them. And she ultimately realized also that having the picture of them looking happy next to the words survived created that juxtaposition that creates a question. What, how, why? They look so cute, you know? So it just all kind of worked together. And so the last move we did to the picture was the original colorized picture. Somehow the artist, she's a plein air artist now. She works out of Temecula. Her name is Carol Laundry. I think it's Laundry or Landry. Landry. She didn't. I didn't have her do the sky. So the first proof on the book, the sky's gray. They're colored, and the sky's gray. And then one of my nieces, Shauna, I think, or Nikki, said, Ben, why don't you make the sky blue? And that was our last tweak. We made the sky blue. So but the picture is just, I mean, they're so cute. And, how do you get past those 2 cute kids? We got so lucky with our parents. You don't get to choose. Boy, did we get lucky.
What a blessing. And that resilient spirit, lives on through you and your
Absolutely.
whole family. and you can see, in your expressions and the love between all of you. And I know it's because your parents wanted to have a close family, and they were so dedicated, as parents. And so I appreciate that so much. And if you had one parting thing that you would like to say about why you do what you do, why do you continue? Because you've spoken this week at several events helping youth to
Mhm.
understand, to hear your mom's story. Why do you continue to do that today?
Mm. It's like I said, it's both an honor and a privilege, and I think a need. And I continue. Actually spoke 6 times already this week, 6 different classes, all 10th graders, and it's just, I think it's in my DNA. Now we have these terms like inherited trauma. You didn't hear that 40 years ago. You know,
Right,
yeah, yeah. You might have inherited their eye color, but forget about trauma, kid. That's all on you. But now we
right.
know. And so how did I have Holocaust nightmares of Germans at my front door while we're having dinner inside before I knew about the Nazis? Go figure. I didn't, as a kid, I just kept having these dreams, and I knew my dad had nightmares. Somehow I inherited his nightmares, right? Mom never had them, but dad had nightmares every night. And so did I for a big portion of my life. It took a long time till I added something to my diet, to my life, that sort of quelled the dreams. So, um, yeah, I think it's in my DNA. I don't see it as a big choice. Right? And again, it's also a right, and it's a privilege, and it's an honor. So it's not like I don't want to do it. It's not, but just like mom, it wasn't that she didn't want to do it, but it also held true that it was never easy. So, and it's a need, and it's a privilege. Not everybody share stories of resilience, love with people often.
Right. Oh, it is an honor and a privilege. And it's an honor and a privilege for us to get to have you, bear witness of your mom's testimony and to hear her
Thank you, Karen.
story. And I that the reason I left that picture on the cover is because I feel hope. I feel like, if your mom and dad can go through what they went through and come out on the other side focused on love, focused on the good, focused on serving, I can do the same thing. And I think that's a beautiful message in their life and in the way that they lived. So thank you so much for being with us, Ben. This was such a joy to hear you
Thank you.
speak to us today. And thank you,
And
especially on this very busy week for you, to make time to be with us.
it's my pleasure, and I really am grateful for you carrying on and sharing my mom and other survivors' stories of hope, resilience, and ultimately coming back to love, like your podcast.
Thank you. Yes, coming back to love. Thank you,
Coming back
Ben.
to love. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
All right. Wasn't that so special? Oh my word. So many times I read these books, and yet when you see Rose tell her story, and it just comes alive, and to hear the emotion in her voice, and it's just so incredible. And then to hear Ben give the additional insights, about his dad, and how she continued this legacy, and now he continues to carry on this legacy. So that's a beautiful thing. um, so we have a, a guest that is with us as well, and her name is Tamara Hunter, and she is going to be joining us, and I am so excited to have Tamara here. And it is an honor to get to meet her. And she is the founder of cb4l.org, Emo Buddies for Life.org. And she has experienced trauma as well, not from the Holocaust. And this is something that I wanted people to understand, is that many times we go through hard things in life, and yet we can take, like I said, just a few minutes ago, we can take hope from these stories, and we can take the lessons of how to be resilient. And so anyway, I just wanted to preface that and let you know a little bit about Tamara. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but we are so grateful to have Tamara with us today. So we will bring Tamara up, and there she is. So,
Hello.
yay! Hello, Tamara. So glad that you could be with us.
You know, the honor is all mine, and I have been watching since the beginning, and I am in awe to even be in the same lineup with those that have spoken and shared their stories. I am so deeply inspired by everything I have heard from, the rabbi with the prayer and the candles and the legacy explained. And that is what legacy of love is all about, right? And then you hear Rosie up on the stage, and then you hear Benjamin speaking about not only his mother, and who's such a spicy, fun person, and his father, and their shared experience, yet experiencing it in different ways. And I think that is what it just touched me in such a way. And I'm thinking, okay, what can I share? And yet I understand what it is that I can. And so thank you for inviting me to be a part of this, and be a humble representative of those that have experienced. I mean, trauma is trauma is trauma. Right now, you have singular historical atrocities that take place, like the Holocaust. And yes, we must remember the lessons. Yet, and we learn that it is a generational situation, right? Yet, but when you hear those three words, something like cancer or something else that could be a family trauma, that can also be an experience that can go one way or another. There can be a fork in the road, just like so many that have been shared today. And I loved it when she was up on stage and she's talking about, oh yes, I did this and I did that. And, and there's that spark. And it's that same thing when you face some type of a trauma that might be in today's world. There's an epidemic again that's taking so many lives, and it is that 4-letter word cancer and other health challenges. So thank you, Karen, for
Yes.
this experience, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of it.
Thank you. And, I appreciate so much what you said, because trauma is trauma, and the feelings, we can relate to each other on a feeling level. I may not have experienced, what you have, but I have felt shock. I have felt, crushed. I have felt helpless. I have felt similar feelings that people often experience. And so it's important that we recognize that we are the same, that even if we have different experiences, we're experiencing things with feelings, and those feelings we can relate on that level. And so tell us a little bit more about you and what the Holocaust means to you.
Thank you for asking. And in fact, when you asked that question originally, I'm like, oh, let me tell you, I have a library full of books, because from a very young age, I had this, I don't know, I was drawn to the stories, and I have read just everything I could get my hands on. I have then dived deep, and you call me almost a geek in regards to it. And what's interesting about that is that when I went through my own personal journey, of which my cancer story is one that it is a generational story also. And so I started thinking about your question, what does it mean to me, the Holocaust? And I looked at my family story, and I thought, the fact that generationally going through our family stories, each generation has a choice to make. And we can choose the road of hope and healing and connection and all of the higher frequency that is available to, if you will, cut the cord of that generational situation. And many that I have studied throughout the years within the Holocaust stories, there were those champions in their families, similar to like a Rosie and now a Benjamin, that say, you know, we're choosing love, we're choosing hope, we're choosing resilience. And it's the same thing when we have families that now have some type of a trauma that could be historically based, or it could be medically based, or it could be something else. It still affects more than that particular person. We don't live in an isolated world, at least hopefully not.
Right.
Right.
And
And sorry to step on your words, but that's really what, what's driving me right now with what we're doing with our message and then being here to share.
yes, and thank you for pointing that out, because so many times we treat different situations differently. I've often thought, if somebody breaks a leg or breaks a hip or something, the neighbors rush in with meals or well wishes or things. But when somebody is suffering with a mental health issue, there's not that same support that always happens. And yet, if we would focus on love, if we would focus on connection and rallying around to support that person who is suffering, just like when they are suffering with cancer or something else, this world would be a better place, and it would be a better experience, because that support is so needed and it's so vital to healing in all the ways. And so I appreciate your mission to spread love, to focus on connection, and to focus on building community so that people can heal.
Thank you for saying that. And yes, you touched on a topic that's near and dear to me. And it really does come down to, within our community, we have a way of saying humor, hope, heart, hugs, and a whole lot of love. That's our phrase. That when we have the buddies get together is what our community calls ourselves. And we do believe, because truthfully, all of the roads within life come back to that 4-letter word, love, and the frequency of love. Guys, if you haven't done any kind of studying, you will be amazed that it does have healing properties within it. And when one or more gather together, and that's, I think, a lot of the lessons that you're sharing today in this message. When one or more are there to have the family meal and to be there with the candles, when one or more are sharing the stories to remember the legacies of love that are just, oozing out of Rosie and Benjamin and the rabbi, and when she was talking about her husband, and just so much that we each, and this is the thing I want, and when you touched on the mental health, that within our group, we have a show that we that is kind of an extension, and we help to explore our fabulous lives. And our community, we focused in particularly on that mental health component. And the bottom line again was, you're not alone. Don't face it alone. And then, find that spark within. And if you can't find it, help someone else, because you know what? We are all there to help each other. And someone's just waiting to hear from you.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And that's what these messages today in the history, the Holocaust History Museum, and the stories. And I implore upon people that possibly say, hey, what does it have to do with me? Everything. The lessons within, you will be touched.
Mhm.
Everything. And the bottom line is, we are a human family, and we need to start treating each other like family members and care for each other and share the love.
Yes, treat each other like a loving family. Oh my goodness, that is so true. I appreciate so much how, in many organizations, it starts at the top, and your mission that you have for all the different things that you are involved in permeates those organizations. And that comes through because of you, because of your values, and because that is important to you. So I just want to acknowledge that.
You're going to make me tear up here. Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I appreciate so much how you love to read. I'm the same way. And I as I mentioned earlier, I read Anne Frank and Corrie ten Boom, and I loved reading these stories. In fact, I just get so engrossed that I can hardly put it down, even just, researching and preparing, for this event. I could hardly stop, because I'm so captivated by the messages, by the stories of hope, to find hope, to be able to be resilient. It just amazes me. So if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the lessons that you've learned in your experiences about how to be resilient.
Well, thank you for that. In fact, I will say that Anne Frank, I was asked to speak a year or two ago about women for Women's History Month. And I picked a few women that really impressed me with their stories. One was my great grandmother. She was a suffragette, and yet just an amazing person, not to get out there and fight the system, but to work within it. And then I also spoke of Anne Frank, and where I come from with all of it is that I really do believe that each day we show up, we can be that ripple effect, just like Anne Frank, just like my great grandmother Pearl, and just like you, Karen, just like myself, just like all of us showing up with our humble messages. And mine, yes, I heard those 3 words, and I'm one of 5 people in 4 generations that heard it. 3 survived, 2 gained their wings, but we all learned the lessons from it all. And in searching through, what is it that can change for our history to come, for our legacy to come within my own personal family, that was one of the driving factors, to be honest with you, to get this going, was because I knew if we could change the environment out there, one person at a time, to realize that we do and we can change and cut those cords of the history of the past that don't serve us. Right? Keep them going to our future generations. And if I can step up to the plate and bat through for my next generations to come and to help others to do the same thing, boy, will my life have meant something? If you can show up and help one person, inspire one person, think of who Rosie has inspired. That book Benjamin held up. I love the story. Hold it backwards, Mom, until she was ready to hold it forward. Sometimes that's where you start.
Right.
But start. That's what whenever I talk to people, because I do a lot, because I was someone that was born that my mouth didn't even form right. And I couldn't be understood for the first 5 years of my life. And then once it was fixed, they couldn't shut me up. Yeah. And so, who am I? The girl next door that received a message, but then said, what? It's time for me to do what I can for those coming in my own family, similar to the many Holocaust survivors I'm sure did, and the next generation like Benjamin. And I'm going to encourage those that are listening right now is take this message, because women in particular, your focus is on women. Women are the heart of the matter, and we are the legacy creators, makers, keepers of the history. And we are those that can share that legacy of love that is today. It's not a history of only yesterday, though I'm big history nut as you are, but taking the history of yesterday, living today, and taking it into the future. And we as women, it's our privilege, I see it, to be those legacy of love keepers and makers and sharers, and
Yes. Oh, yes.
right?
I love that what you said, because we are the legacy of love makers and keepers. and and that is, you just said that so good, just so perfectly articulated. And one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on women in the Holocaust is because many times it is women that help others to be able to deal with their trauma, and traditionally women have more vocabulary for talking about things related to emotional intelligence and related to emotions and feelings. And so many times we're the ones that help others to learn how to do that, to learn how to process, to even make it safe enough to have that environment of love, so that others do feel safe enough to be able to process whatever pain, they are going through, so that they can, swing through and move through that pain instead of being stuck in that. And many Holocaust survivors say that they felt stuck for a time until they learned some of these skills. So it's not automatic. It's a process for each one of us, no matter what we're going through. But as women, we have such an important role, especially within our family and our communities, because we do make such a difference with that environment and that ability to communicate and create that legacy of love. And so thank you so much, because you embody that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And so do you. And what you're doing here, bravo. Bravo. Thank you. It needs to be done, and it needs to continue to be done. And I am so grateful that you allowed me to be a humble part of this, because we all need to step up. We all need to step up and say, now is the time. Now is the time. We can be the legacy makers and join us, lock arms and say, okay, no more of what that was. Because we can make that difference. And as mothers, as grandmothers, as aunts, as neighbors, as community leaders, each one take that ripple effect and share that love for the hope. And let's not let this happen again. And you know what? Guys, let's be real. We're on the cusp of a lot of noise out there. Yet, we can also show up every day and help to share the love, because there is frequency and healing in that. So what are you going to choose today? That's what I'm going to throw out there to everybody. Ask yourself, what are you going to choose? And if you have a choice to make and you can make a difference in whatever ripple effect, please do. We need you. We need you.
We do. And it's so interesting, because many times when we're in situations and we can't think of what we can do, or maybe, like during the Holocaust, what could a person do to affect change? But even thinking about love can make such a difference. Just the energy that exudes from us. I think it's absolutely fascinating. They've done scientific studies on people that have just meditated. I don't know how many are familiar with this, but this one example is the Maharishi effect, where people were meditating to send love to Washington, D.C. And it was during the summer, and there was crime rampant, and so they let the leaders know that they were going to be doing this. And they said, well, the only thing that'll make crime go down when it's hot and everybody's miserable and all of things is a snowstorm. And so they documented it. They said, well, we're going to do this. And then they measured it, and it dropped drastically. And there was no other change except for this group that were meditating to bring greater love. And the same thing with people that have gone through heart disease. People will be praying for them or sending them well wishes or positive energy. And nobody knows in the group who's being prayed for and who isn't. And it doesn't matter, because the ones who are statistically heal faster.
Right.
And I'm just like, unbelievable.
It's true. It's true.
So even if we can't physically go and take the meal or physically give someone a hug, maybe they're far away and we can't reach them. Maybe we can't even talk to them on the phone for whatever reason. We can still send love no matter what.
100%. I mean, if we had a lot of time right now, I could go into a lot of fact in regards to that and stories. The bottom line is you're right. You're right. And that's what I hope everybody that you have watching this amazing experience right now that you've put on is that if you can understand that the power of your heart, the power of that heart of yours is absolutely, if you will, a miracle. It is, and it can create those miracles, and there is science to back it up.
Yes, there is. Thank you so much. And Tamara, we'll have to have you again because yes, we'll just geek out about history and miracles and neuroscience and all the things.
I absolutely just let me know, and I'll be here. Again, Karen, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you too. And thank you for the love and for being a legacy of love maker and keeper and for perpetuating that in your family, in your community, because it's a blessing to all of us. And
Absolutely.
thank you for those ripples because I am being blessed.
Thank you. And I am too. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, well, that was amazing to get to hear her tell about her story and to apply the things that the lessons that we can take and I do take those lessons from those survivors and I do gain hope and it does help me to be more resilient. I honestly can say if they could go through that, then I can deal with what I'm dealing with. And the same thing with Tamara. You know, if she can deal with what she's dealing with and continue to focus on love, I can work to do that too. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you, Tamara, for being with us today. So our next speaker is Blair Kaplan, and we are going to hear her message. She is the founder of the Global Resilience Project, and she also is Jewish, and she tells us her story. So we'll be happy to hear from Blair. So welcome back to Voices of Resilience. And our next speaker is Blair Kaplan Venables, who is a British Columbia-based grief and resilience expert, a coach, motivational speaker, and the founder of the Global Resilience Project. She's also the podcast host with Resilient AF with Blair and Alana. And she has shared her expertise widely on Forbes, Psychology Today. She has a TEDx talk, CBC Radio, Entrepreneur, and many other places. And she also is a best-selling author and the curator of Resilient AF anthologies. And so welcome, Blair. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
And as we've been, honoring the victims of the Holocaust, the 6 million Jews who perished and those who survived, one of the things that has really touched my heart, such as, the message from Rose about, finding hope and how to carry on after dealing with such horrific abuse and trauma. Resilience is such a key to that. And so when you think about the Holocaust stories, what does this bring up for you?
Yes, and these stories, the stories we hear of survivors or families of survivors or the helpers or those who are perished, they're also heroic. And before I go into that, I just want to define what resilience is, because traditionally in society, resilience is defined as bouncing back from a challenging experience. I think that's BS. Resilience is bouncing forward from a challenging experience because we're never going back. And yes, and I just want to start with that because it's all about the forward movement. And I have a deep respect for anyone who survived the Holocaust, whoever decides to share their stories or keep them within. There's a deep respect. And also, it's paired with this grief of those stories that are not told, the stories of those who perished, the stories of those survivors who've decided to keep them in inwards and all of those people and those stories that haven't been acknowledged, because we have to talk about it, because history, as we can see around us, repeats itself. And the weight of the stories that we're hearing today and that we've heard, they're heavy and they're real. These aren't stories that are made up. These are survivors who still have their numbers tattooed on them, who've watched many people around them, strangers and loved ones, die and be tortured, and they're still here to tell the story. And those survivors are quickly like dwindling because
Absolutely.
they're aging. And I also have an understanding that trauma just doesn't end when the event ends, and there's also intergenerational trauma. And
Yes.
I want to acknowledge I am Jewish. My family was not, where they were not victims of the Holocaust. We were victims of the Russian pogroms, which was earlier than the Holocaust. And basically in Russia, they were murdering the Jews and they destroyed our family's property, and our family fled to Canada. And there is that intergenerational trauma. I'm a third generation Canadian, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to have my lineage have survived or perished in the Holocaust. So growing up, going to Jewish school and Hebrew school, a lot of my friends did have those people as grandparents who would come and speak to us. And I also have so much gratitude for the resilience of those people who, went through this, and the grief that they carry with them while being that light and sharing their story while they still can. Because survival doesn't necessarily mean that someone wasn't wounded. It means they kept bouncing forward. They kept going forward.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for clarifying that, because we never can go back. Our brain wants to go back, but we never can go back because we've been changed. And so bouncing forward, what a great perspective on resilience. And thank you so much for sharing your family's story, and what a miracle that they were able to escape and go to Canada. But you're absolutely right, that intergenerational trauma continues on, and it takes inner work to deal with that, and it takes so much courage to look inside, to do that work, and to share that story. So it is such an honor to hear from people who are willing to share their story, and thank you for sharing your story as well. So what have you noticed about how grief travels across generations?
That's a really great question. So, grief moves whether it's named or not. When it's unspoken, whether it happens to you or it's passed down intergenerationally, genetically, it often shows up as anxiety, hypervigilance, perfectionism, mental health struggles, emotional distance. And children essentially inherit emotional patterns before they inherit language. And I know with my generation, I'm a vintage millennial, we talk about mental health, where my parents' generation, that wasn't really something they did. And thinking about their parents' generation, and now the generations that come after my generation, they're very open about talking about mental health. And so we're able to name things that we didn't know existed, and naming those feelings that are maybe grief but we don't know it's grief helps us understand and process. And what isn't processed gets passed on as coping strategies, not stories. So healing one generation can soften the load for the next, because grief doesn't disappear. It either gets carried consciously or inherited unconsciously. And if we can name it, tell those stories, and process and begin to heal, we're doing the future of our humanity a big service without forgetting what these stories are.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And you're right. The previous generations, I think they were so much more focused on survival that they
Mhm.
weren't able to talk about it, and it just wasn't common. We just didn't have the skills to do that in years past.
Mhm.
And my mom, she's 86, and she marvels at how much we talk about feelings,
Mhm.
and my mom was one who talked about feelings, but she still just is like, wow, you guys have so much more available to you to help with parenting and processing grief and dealing with emotions that we didn't have, in my generation. And so that is a very great point. And so that makes it even more amazing that these survivors have worked through that. And you're right. When we don't deal with it, it's passed on, like you said, as coping mechanisms. And so when you talk about resilience, you say it isn't about being strong, it's about how we relate to pain. Can you elaborate some more on that?
Yeah, and I think what's really important is that resilience isn't white knuckling the pain. It's
Right.
learning how to sit with it and still move forward. Being strong often means suppressing, pushing through, or minimizing pain, but that doesn't do anyone's service, you or anyone else. Resilience is about making room for the pain without letting it define you. And
Oh,
the ability to feel, regulate, adapt, endure in silence, be really sad, cancel those plans, admit what's on your mind. True resilience includes tenderness, rest, and support. Strength hardens, but resilience allows that movement.
oh, that is so true. I mean, we forget that part of resilience is actually resting, is being gentle with ourselves. I often talk about, emotional intelligence and being able to regulate our emotions. And until we show empathy for ourselves, we don't even remember the things that we need to do to regulate our emotions. And being able to process emotions is not in our prefrontal cortex until we are able to de-escalate those emotions. And so to be able to be resilient takes showing that self-love to ourselves. So thank you for bringing that up, because it takes a lot of strength to show self-love to yourself, and it takes a lot of strength to be able to sit with that pain. Like you said, sometimes the ability to be uncomfortable and to not escape and run away from the pain, that takes a lot of strength to be able to look at it and to be curious about it. And so what is the problem with silence? Because you mentioned how a lot of time people don't talk about it. In generations past, that was very common. Just stoic, just move on, just do your duty, keep going. And many times there weren't people to talk about it with, even if someone wanted to. So what is the problem with silence, and why do people have such a hard time talking about trauma in general?
Well, silence was often a survival strategy, especially for earlier generations, but silence may seem like it keeps you safe, but it also will keep you alone. And if you can't name what's going on, it's hard to begin to process and heal those, pains. So trauma can often carry shame, fear, or a belief that speaking will cause harm, which isn't true most of the time. Not for every situation, but many people were never taught the language for what they experienced. So silence to some people protects them in the short term, but isolates them in the long term. And essentially, without the language, the pain goes inwards.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so true. And like you said, so many times, they didn't know what else to do. And so they just, it was a protective defense mechanism. So what happens when that grief goes unspoken? What happens besides the isolation that is very true? What else?
Um, like in general,
Like in
it can,
general and within families.
yeah, families will sense pain even when they don't understand it. We're
Mhm.
all, especially like genetically connected families, like we are all connected. So intergenerational trauma and loss of identity can happen. Children may grow up managing emotions that aren't theirs. Emotional distance can form without anyone knowing why. Patterns of fear, control, or emotional shutdown might emerge. Love is present, but the connection might feel fragile. If grief isn't spoken about or the situations aren't spoken about and it stays quiet, essentially it starts to echo. And just a personal story, I had trauma in my family. It wasn't really spoken about, and I developed addiction problems. I'm now 7 years sober. But if things were spoken about, I may have gone down a different path. And also a Holocaust related story is one of my dear friends. Her family were survivors of the Holocaust. And once they survived, they decided to no longer practice Judaism and hide their faith. And when my friend became an adult, like she knew she was Jewish, but they didn't really practice. She actually went to Israel and came back and went through like not conversion classes because she's Jewish, but Judaism 101 because she wanted to be more Jewish. And
Oh,
I think that's a really beautiful story about my generation, is that once we start talking about what happened, we can make our own choices on how we want to heal our past generations.
right. Oh my goodness. And you brought up such a good point because, even as children, we can sense when something is off.
Oh yeah.
People may not say anything, but we can feel the energy. We have the neuroception where we perceive things, but we don't have the language to understand it, and we
Mhm.
don't have the information either. And so then there's this question in our mind, what's going on? And the natural instinct that we default to as children is, did I do something? Is it because of me? Because that's the only thing we can control. And so,
Mm.
that's a common feeling that children grow up with, and then that can lead to people pleasing and some other issues. And then when we feel that pain ourselves, like you said, then that can lead to escaping and addictions and
Mhm.
some other things, because we may not have anyone to talk to. We may not understand it. It may be very subconscious, and we don't have the ability to deal with that. So thank you for your courage to share that vulnerability with us, because I know many people who have gone through trauma, and they're very sensitive souls that are trying to process it, but the pain is just so great, and that's a very common thing to numb in some way. And there's all kinds of different addictions that, I mean, it's not necessarily a substance. It could be work, it could be food, it could be TV. There's almost every single one of us. I don't know a single person that doesn't have an addiction of some sort, sugar, And so I think that that's a very, very common thing, that we look to escape those uncomfortable feelings. Every single one of us, we burn our hand. We don't want to stick around and leave our hand in the fire. We want to escape that pain. So what do you think helps people move from silence into meaning while they're healing within their own time frame? Because it's so frustrating when someone says to someone else, "Aren't you over that yet?" Because each of us have different personalities, different perceptions, different experiences, different resources. Even within the same family, we have different resources. So does how do people receive the help to move from silence into meaning?
Right. And that's a great question. So, meaning comes from listening to yourself and not rushing yourself. I've created something called the Navigating Grief Framework, which is a framework with 5 different elements that are meant to be used as a guide to navigate healing, trauma, grief, challenges. And it's all based on neuroscience, science of the brain. And there's an element in there, the I element, it spells out the word grief, which is introspection for understanding, which is going inwards. And when you go inwards, so it gives you this permission to go slowly and own your time and your order and your process. It gives you time to reflect without the pressure to perform any sort of healing. It allows for curiosity instead of judgment. Why, asking yourselves, why is this happening? Why do I feel like this? What happened? What happened? Why did it happen? How did it happen? Um, and it allows you to be private with your meaning making before publicly sharing. What is your purpose? And then understanding that healing isn't linear. It's, there's days where you take 5 steps forward and days you take 4 steps back. And really going inwards and doing it for yourself is the most important. And when you decide what your purpose is, why are you here? It allows you to begin that forward movement.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this tool. And we'll be sure and put the link for that so that people can get that tool to how to navigate grief. Because I think that most of us are wanting to know how to navigate grief, and it's very challenging. And many times we have no idea how to do it. We don't have someone that we feel safe, talking to. And so to do this work on our own and to have a guide to help us is so powerful. Blair, we could talk for probably an hour about this subject. And I appreciate so much you being with us today. And thank you for sharing these things and for helping us to realize that grief is very personal, and developing resilience is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that we oftentimes revisit, and we grieve in layers. And so many times we think, oh, well, I've already passed that. I've already dealt with that. But then we have something that comes up and we might grieve again. And so that process of resilience is bouncing forward again and again, because we have those setbacks, but then we use those tools and we bounce forward again. So thank you for being with us here today. We are so grateful for all of your insights, from your lived experience, from your wisdom, and from your compassion and your desire to help others to learn these things that you have learned so that they can have greater happiness in their life. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
That was great to hear from Blair Kaplan Venables. And, she just had such courage to share, to vulnerably share about her experiences with dealing with trauma. And I just applaud her for sharing that with all of us, because I think all of us can relate on a certain level. And I wanted to properly thank her for taking the time out to be with us, and to share what she has shared with so many people. She has a podcast, and I encourage you to go and listen to that. It's Resilient with Blair and Alana. So now I wanted to share a special music video, and it's about being unstoppable. And I want you to know that you are unstoppable, that whatever you are going through, whatever you have gone through, that you can move forward, that there are tools, that there is help out there, that there are things that you can learn from other people's experiences that can give you just a knot to hold on to at the end of your rope. And I want you to know that you have the ability within to be resilient, and you are loved, and you are a miracle, and you are worthy. So I just want to share that with all of you, and I hope that you'll hear that in the message of this next song.
They tried to hand me a finish line, said my best days were left behind, but I'm just warming up inside. This heart still burns, this soul still shines. I've lived, I've learned, I've lost, I've grown, built my dreams from broken stones. Every scar just shows me how strong I've always been till now. They put a number on my name, tried to tell me when to change, but I don't fit inside their rules. I was born to break them through. I'm unstoppable, watch me rise. Every season, every time. No expiration on this flame. I'm just getting better with age. I'm unstoppable, hear me say. I'm not done, I'm on my way. Every chapter still unwinds. I'm unstoppable by design. They say time is closing in, but I feel it opening. Every door that I step through leads me closer to what's true. I'm unstoppable, watch me rise. Every season, every time. No expiration on this flame. I'm just getting better with age. I'm unstoppable, hear me say, I'm not done, I'm on my way. Every chapter still unwinds. I'm unstoppable by design. We're not fading, we're evolving. Every dream still worth resolving. From the young to the wise, we have fire in every life. Different stories, one heartbeat, every voice, every age. We don't wait for permission, we step forward unafraid. We're unstoppable, here we stand. Every woman, every man. No more limits, no more lines. We were born to redefine. We're unstoppable, loud and clear. This is our becoming year. Every future, every sign. We are unstoppable by design. Ooh, by design.
Oh, my goodness, did you just get emotional watching that? When I saw the runner with, no legs, and it reminded me of Amy Purdy, and how she lost her legs and then had to relearn to walk, and then was on Dancing with the Stars. You just take so much courage from these examples of others. And when it said, I'm unstoppable by design. We are designed to be unstoppable. Sometimes we don't feel like it, but that's okay. That's the time to rest. That's the time to just nurture ourselves. That's the time to maybe seek for additional resources for support. But we are unstoppable by design. And even when we tell ourselves that, that gives us just a little bit of a boost. And then to remind ourselves, I'm unstoppable. Watch me rise. We are meant to rise. And so I just want to thank Tamara Hunter for providing that music video for us, and I'm so grateful for her generosity. I also want to acknowledge our sponsors, the Global Women's Journal and Aspire to Greatness. And I want to thank Michael Adam Cohen for assisting in connecting me with so many of these wonderful guests. Our next speaker, I would also like to give special thanks to the Jewish Funders Network for making this interview possible with her. And so our next speaker is Dr. Edith Eager, and she is just absolutely incredible. She's another Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz. She was also a young girl when she was taken there, and she talks a lot about the choice. And it took her years and years to process her trauma, and so I know that her story is going to be so valuable. So I just want to thank all who made this day possible. Thank all of you who joined and who were listening. Thank everyone who is committed to love, to loving each other, to spreading love, to sending out those ripple effects, to support each other and to help each other to build that resilience, and to remember the Holocaust victims, that their lives were not in vain. And they are so grateful that we are remembering them today. So thank you for Edie for this interview. And we will go now to hear her thoughts about her experience. And then we will end.
I feel very, very privileged to be with you this morning, especially today when we celebrate a Jewish way. Our wonderful parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. I'm just recognizing today that there are not that many survivors left. If I am not going to do it, then who will? So it's really my duty. I owe it to my parents to let them know what happens when good people really do terrible, terrible things. And I am always just in awe to people like you, because you go beyond the me, and the I. That's what it took in Auschwitz. All we had was each other then, and of course, all we have is each other now. So I feel very privileged. I get up in the morning and I wonder, how I can be useful to people. God gave me a second chance, not only survive, but also guide others surviving from that feeling that you're locked in and you don't have any other choice but to give up. So I can't is not in my vocabulary. I must tell you that I had a boyfriend, Friedman Imre, and unfortunately he was killed a day before liberation. But we were very much in love and very much planning for the future. And when I was put in a cattle car, he said to me, "I never forget your eyes and your hands. You have beautiful eyes." And I can tell you in Auschwitz, that kept me alive, that even though I was told I'm never going to get out of here alive, I'm cancer to society, and yet I was able to listen and not say anything. But to myself, I said to myself, I know that you're wrong, and I know that you're the one is the prisoner, not me. I have my conscience. So today I know that it's good to talk to yourself, and it's very important when you are for something rather than against. And so I say, yes, I am, yes, I can, yes, I will. And believe me, yes, you can choose. The more choices we have, the less we feel like a victim. Victims will always find a victimizer. And I see that sometimes in marriage, that the victim becomes the victimizer, and they go back and forth and back and forth. And let me tell you that I went to a Jewish school, and my school teacher was with us. And she said to me, "Do as I told you, go," and just pushed me in front of. And so what I did, I closed my eyes and I pretended that the music was Tchaikovsky, and I was dancing the Romeo and Juliet at the Budapest Opera House. And when I met Viktor Frankl, who really became my mentor, and I remember he said, I closed my eyes and I pretended that I'm in a Vienna lecture hall lecturing about the psychology of Auschwitz. and so we both used the same thing, that we checked out and still were able to do what we were told, and not to be against or try to touch even a guard. And many people did. They touched the guards and they got shot right away. So we learned very quickly that all we had was each other then. And of course, all we have is each other now. So I consider it my duty to know that my parents didn't die in vain. And my parents wanted a son, and I came along. At the age of 3, I became cross-eyed, so they took me for a walk and blindfolded me because they didn't want anyone to see what an ugly sister I was. And to top that, my mother told me very seriously, I'm glad you have brains because you have no looks. So, so what happened, if you ask my sister who took care of who, she'll tell you she took care of me, and I will tell you that I took care of my sister. So I remember when we were completely naked, completely shaven, she looked at me and asked me, how do I look? And, you know, Hungarian women are pretty vain. And so I had a choice then, as you have a choice now, whether you choose how you're going to respond and not to react. Because when you react, you don't think. And I looked at Magda and I said, Magda, you have such beautiful eyes. And I didn't see it when you had your hair all over the place. So I ask people today, if you say anything at any time, ask yourself, is it very necessary and is it kind? Because God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we would talk less and listen more. And so it's not what you lost, it's what is still here, honey. You and I are still here. So it's not why me, it's what now. My ballet master, he told me a word that I didn't understand. He said that God built me in such a way that all my ecstasy has to come from inside out. But I didn't know what that meant until I was in Auschwitz. And the other thing, when I was in a cattle car, my mom held me and said, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what's going to happen. Just remember, no one can take away from you what you put here in your own mind. And that's what I tell the children when I go to school. And I say, I can't. And then I take the apostrophe and the T, and I can. Why? Because I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. Yes, I am. Yes, I can. Yes, I will. So that's the mantra. So when the communists came and they confiscated the business that was in my husband's family for many, 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 many years, they threw him in jail. And instead of saying, why me, I said, what now? And I took my big diamond ring. I went to the jail. I smuggled out my husband. We ended up at Rothschild in Vienna. And there was a law that people who experienced the hardships and the Holocaust, they could come to America without any visa. And we qualified for that. So that's how we ended up in Baltimore, Maryland in 1949. My mother told me, I'm glad you have brains because you have no looks. You know, you give them a name, you play the game. And I became a very, very well-educated girl, studying and studying. And then, so I was 40 when my supervisor said to me, you know, Edie, I did all the psychological testing. He says, you're not the person who work with things. You have to work with people. So I want you to go and get a PhD. And I said, it's impossible. I'm 40 now. By the time I get a doctorate, I'll be 50. And you know what he said? You'll be 50 anyway. So do you want to be driven or do you want to be the driver? Because there is no freedom without responsibility. It's anarchy. I began to really recognize that I did have a choice. I had a choice in Auschwitz. And then when I began to work with Navy SEALs, you know, they are kind of a different breed of cat. They have to do all kinds of things to become a SEAL. You have to walk and climb and crawl, and very difficult to become a SEAL. So I had a very interesting session and told him that I am very proud to be a Jew because my ancestors didn't have it so good as we do, and that he also can become a wonderful father and a role model to his daughter the way he is loving the child's mother. So love is not what you feel, it's what you do, that you commit yourself to someone other than you, and that's what, we practiced. Auschwitz was an opportunity for discovering what my ballet master told me, that the ecstasy will not come from the outside, that I have to create the world, and the more I suffered, the stronger I became. And
Yeah.
so when people ask, where was God in Auschwitz? I say, God was with me, and God showed me how to change hatred to pity. And I began to feel sorry for the guards who were wearing that uniform and throwing children into the oven without even gassing them. And I think God was with me, and God is with me. When a person comes to me and tells me I'm depressed, and I say, what's good about being depressed? And that person says nothing. And then I say, could it be that when you're depressed, you can get by with less? You may not have to wash the dishes. You may not have to take out the garbage that you don't want to do anyway. And that's why I ask people to think about their thinking, just what my mother told me, and pay attention what you're paying attention to. So pay attention what you're focusing on that is in alignment and gets you closer to a goal. People were calling me, writing me, that they like the choice, but they need something more practical. I want a how-to book, and that's how the gift came about. When I came to America, I didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't have $6 to get off the boat. So I didn't even know I didn't have any verbal capacity, and I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. So unfortunately, I had my secret, and I didn't tell anyone I was in Auschwitz for close to 20 years. And the person who really helped me more than anything else was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Have you ever read a book that you wanted to write 10 more pages? And that's what I did. And I published a paper, Viktor Frankl and me, the little old me, and I got a letter from Viktor Frankl from Vienna. He wants to meet me in San Diego at the International University, and he was in his 70s, and he was mountain climbing, and he was taking flying lessons. Amazing role model to me, and then colleague as well. So I am very grateful. But he was in his 30s in Auschwitz. He was a medical doctor, and I was 16 in love. So we came in a different time in our lives. I was, of course, dreaming that I'm going to meet my boyfriend, and he was pretending that he's lecturing in Vienna about the concentration camp of Auschwitz. And I'm so happy that I can tell you that what comes out of your body doesn't make you ill. What stays in there does. Maybe there is no such thing as going back. There is a new beginning. Free from your self-dialogue and using words like I always, I never. Instead, you say, up till now I did this, and now I'm going to do something else. Or in the past I did that, and now I'm going to try something new. Do something every day what you have previously avoided. I'm not a victim. It's not my identity. It's what was done to me. There is a big difference. And to be able to acknowledge that while you're angry, you suffer, because anger has a lot of other emotion underneath, and most of it is fear. And fear and love does not coexist. So when you have fear, write them all down, because you were not born with fear. You were born with love and joy and passion for life. They bring you the spirit of a woman of strength, not a strong woman, a woman of strength who are carrying the ancestors that they never gave up ever. And I hope that you decide to be for something, and self-love is self-care. It's not narcissistic. I am a Wonder Woman. I kind of look up and say, oh, I wonder what I could do when I was in your shoes. And so I'm kind of like a museum guide. I put a few things out there, but I don't say this is what you do and that is what you do. Take charge of your feeling and take charge of your behavior, because none of the positive thinking does any good unless it's followed with a positive action. I was liberated. I was put in a cast, and I could hardly speak because my lung was filled with water. And reality hit me. My parents didn't come back. I was told that my boyfriend was killed a day before liberation. So when I got up in the morning, I didn't say what. I said, what for? We grieve over not what happened, but what didn't happen. And one of the things we do a lot of the times, we use defense mechanisms like denial or minimization. It wasn't so bad. Other people suffered more. It's not really realistic. It's okay to feel the feeling, but I don't camp there or set up household there. I'm choosing to use the word opportunity for an opportunity, not to recover, but discover the part of me that was able to look at life from inside out and not to wait for someone to come and liberate me. So I think, again, when you change your thinking, I think you can really change your life. I had a therapist, and I told my therapist to put me in a fetal position and not let me get up. We did that, and then I decided I have to go back to that lion's den and look at the lion in the face. I have to go and reclaim my innocence and assign the shame and guilt to the perpetrator and begin to forgive myself that I survived. And so I said, Magda, I like to go back to Auschwitz. And she says, you're an idiot. Just like that. You're a masochist. And I hope that people can really find a way that no matter how difficult life is, you still have a choice to be a victim, because if you're a victim, you're always going to find a victimizer. The heroes who do not just think about the me, that they are givers, and to give them a standing ovation and let them know that we take care of our brothers and sisters, and they are the best role models, because love is not what you feel, it's what you do.